Well, hello fellow pilgrims and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm excited to introduce a new format of a video. I have shared so many personal stories over my Camino journeys that inspired so many of you in different ways, and I have decided to start a series of videos where I talk directly to our fellow pilgrims and help them share their inspirational stories. And my guest today is Jo. She is a British pilgrim, author, coach, and trauma-informed practitioner who has walked about 6,000 kilometers across 12 different Camino routes and not planning to stop. Jo is trained in and informed by many different modalities, including compassionate inquiry, internal family systems coaching, and Ikigai, and uses many tools to support people who want to go on the Camino. Her approach to the Camino blends the practical with deep emotional healing and spiritual reflection. After walking her first Camino in 2016 during the time of spiritual confusion, Jo has made the Camino pilgrimage a cornerstone of her life. Jo currently lives in Spain and she is here with me today to share her story and inspire others on their self-discovery and healing journeys. Hi Jo, and welcome to my channel, and I'm really happy we're doing this. I came across your post on one of the social media platforms in one of the Camino groups. Your post was about you recently publishing your new book, and you've mentioned that you walked over 6,000 kilometers on different Camino routes and that you've relocated to Spain. And I immediately felt compelled to reach out for an interview because I believe that your story would be inspirational for both myself and my audience. Basically, you mentioned that for you, the Camino played a major role in your healing process. So we decided to focus this interview on the healing aspect of the Camino. So I propose to start with you maybe sharing your personal story and how did you even end up on the Camino?
That's a long story, maybe a shorter one, who knows. But thank you so much for having me. It's really, really lovely to chat to you today. And when we started chatting last week, we could have recorded 2 hours then, I think it was, because we just carried on. It was beautiful. A real fellow pilgrim meeting, which is really lovely. So yeah, thanks for having me here. How did I start? Well, I was in recovery. That was one of the key things about my first Camino, I think. So I'd got into recovery from alcoholism in 2012. Finally admitted that I couldn't beat drink and it was beating me. It was kind of fairly functioning from the outside, but it wasn't a great place where I ended up. And I got into recovery in 2012 and actually got into a 12-step program. And one of the big things about a 12-step program is the spiritual aspect of it. And it talks about this higher power. And it mentions God a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean God. It means a higher power, as whatever you understand a higher power to be. And I'd been a few years in recovery and I was absolutely loving the journey, but still couldn't quite figure out this higher power thing. I was like, what is it? Is it God? Is it Buddha? Is it, I went to the Buddhist center. I was reading loads of things. I'm like, what is this? And I was really battling with it. I couldn't get my head around it, and it was kind of, I couldn't get this beardy man on a cloud image out of my head, and it was becoming a bit of a stumbling block in my recovery, and my sponsor in recovery, because I was reading all sorts of different things and quite spiritual stuff and things, and she recommended that I watch the film The which of course is about the Camino, and I watched it. I was like, oh my god, that's amazing, really touched me. I was in tears, absolutely loved it, but no more than watching a really emotional film. But every morning I was getting up and I was doing prayers and meditation and stuff. And in this meditation, normally meditation for me was just listening to my mind going a bit crazy. But that next morning I heard this really clear voice, just a really clear voice, don't know who or what. It didn't sound like mine. Really clear voice saying, you need to walk the Camino. Like, that was it. You need to walk the Camino. And it was like through all the noise of all my crazy thoughts and all that sort of stuff, it was just so clear. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to do that then, and you know, sometimes where you have ideas and you kind of go, oh, I'll do that. And you go, oh, yeah, well, I'm not going to be able to. Or, you know, and you kind of dismiss them quite quickly. This was one of those where I went, okay, how am I going to do that? And immediately started researching the Camino and figuring out how long it was going to take and what, you know, what it was. Because I'd seen the film, but I got no idea about the different routes or anything like that. So I sort of looked it up, and the first thing I saw was that, okay, if I want to do the whole thing, I'm going to need like 5 weeks. Now, my annual holiday was 5 weeks. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not quite sure how I could do that. But rather than go, oh, no, I can't do that then, I went, okay, how can I do it? And so I went to work. I asked my bosses. My bosses were really proud of me being in recovery. They didn't get it, but they were fabulous, and they knew how much it meant to me, and they knew that once I get an idea for something, there's not really any stopping me, so there probably wasn't any point trying to talk me out of it or say no. So they agreed, and once they agreed, I was like, oh crap, that's it, I am walking a Camino, you know, and that was it. It was that was when the journey began, really. So as part of my recovery, who's God? I'm going to go and find God. That's what I said. I'm off to find God. It was brilliant.
So which Camino was your first? And did you hear that voice again on the Camino?
My first was the Camino Frances. So I walked from Saint-Jean in France all the way across to Santiago, and then made it to Finisterre as well. So 32 days it took me altogether. And did I hear that voice again? I've heard that voice in many ways, in many guises, not necessarily the same voice in the same way. But like I was saying, that voice that was so clear in all the noise, one of the things that has been sort of constant throughout my life is the noise. And I think on that first Camino especially, I started to notice more breaks where I could hear. Now, whether that was observing something or hearing something, just more space to be able to kind of hear those messages, see those messages, whether it be that voice or in a different way. But we used to talk a lot in recovery about God incidences. So not coincidences, but God incidences. And that was one thing that was a real thread through my first Camino, not just going on the Camino, but before, you know, the things that had happened, you know, it would be like, oh, I've decided to go there, and then this would happen that linked to it, you know. So there were so many of those, or the people I met had been there, or they'd met that person, or, you know, and so that for me is a sign of me listening, when I can hear those things and notice those things.
So what was that first Camino for you? Like, how did it change your life? What role did it play? Like, can you say that, okay, you came back a completely changed and different person?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I tried many times, especially throughout my drinking, to kind of do things that were going to cause a big shift in my life. You know, I took a year and a half off work. I went all the way around the world. You know, I went to Africa for 6 months volunteering. You know, I did these things to try and almost instigate a big change in my life, and most of that was revolved around stopping drinking. You know, it was like, if I do this, then I'll be able to stop, you know, and I thought that changing me would then change that. And what I think can look back now and say is that by stopping drinking, I was then able to change me. So that recovery process, you know, I think the first 3 years for me were just drying out, really. You know, I was pretty crackers when I look back at that time. You know, I'd shifted my addiction to alcohol to an addiction to a 12-step program because I just had to stay sober, and I didn't know how to do that. You know, I've been drinking for 23 years. I had no idea on how to live life without booze. It was I just didn't know how to do it, and so I had to just cling so tightly to that 12-step program. But in that time, I was changing. I was shifting. My kind of behaviours were obviously changing, but the way I was, I'd done lots of trying to help people, but a lot of the motives for that weren't necessarily really pure. It was all quite selfish, which I think is quite natural for helping people, because it does make you feel better. But also it was from a place of trauma. It was from a place of pain, which I can see now. And what I was starting to do was heal. And I think for me, the Camino came at a perfect time. So I had my 4th sobriety birthday on the Camino. And so in that healing journey, I came to the Camino at a point when I think I was strong enough. I was strong enough to be away from that sort of structure and the safety net I'd got around me of recovery. But I was also sort of young enough in it to be open to the experience of the Camino. So I was kind of safe enough with what I was doing, but still quite fresh to be able to kind of just open my heart and open my mind to, okay, I'm going to go and find God, but I don't know what that is, and I don't know what this looks like. Let's just see, So it wasn't for me, right, I'm going to have a Catholic experience or anything like that. It was, let's just see what happens. And for me, there was something that happened, which was it was a physical, it was a spiritual, it was an emotional breaking point for me around about I would say between 10 and 14, where I hit a wall, absolutely physically. My bag was way too heavy, I didn't take anything to plug in. I'd got a film camera and 36 rolls of film, and if I was probably carrying about 12 kilos at least, it was ridiculous now, but at the time that was it, literally carrying so much burden with me, because that's what I had at the time, it was really representative of that. But the physical pain, but also, this huge amount of time on my own all of a sudden, in my own space with just me, yes, there were others around, but I'd never allowed myself that much time in my own company. And it was, that for me was very difficult. I remember when I first got into recovery, I would just be, somebody said, just stay at home and paint your nails, because they were just trying to get me to sit still for an hour. It was, I just was on, I would run and just sort of run away and be with people and make myself busy and all that. And I think that's another reason why the Camino was perfect for me, because I was doing something. It wasn't, let's just go and sit in a meditation retreat for 3 weeks or anything like that. I could not have handled that at all. So there's a physical aspect of actually moving, which I need, because that's when I can meditate, when I'm actually moving. So whilst moving, I was able to have this space. And that for me was just such a different thing. It was such a difficult thing, and it was so hard. And I just got to that point that I've heard other people get to, of this, I don't know if I can do this. I really don't know if I can do this. I'm in so much pain. This is so difficult, and then I don't know how many days that lasted for, if I'm honest. But then one morning, everything was different. It was just different. And it wasn't that it didn't hurt anymore. I mean, I got shin splints and things like that. There was still those things going on, but something had changed. Something had clipped. Something had sort of tipped over. I don't know what that would be, whether that was a spiritual experience or, you could label it in a number of ways. But that moment then changed everything that came afterwards. And for me, that's another reason why I would always say to somebody, if you're going on your first Camino, maybe do a taster for a couple of days if you want to, but try and make it a good 2 or 3 weeks if you can, because that point of real, physical, emotional, spiritual bump, for me was one of the most special parts of that first Camino. And after that, it was kind of all easy, even though it wasn't, but it sort of was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I'm totally with you on that.
I think for me now, what I can do after that first one is I can drop into it faster. I can go back to a Camino for just a week or 10 days and drop into that in a couple of days, even on the first day, just because of knowing the rhythm, knowing the routine, knowing that, so much of your first Camino is just figuring out the rhythm of it, how it all works, that, well, when I get in, then when do I wash my clothes, and, all of that stuff, which can crowd it a little bit. But I think once you've done one, you can then drop back into that faster. And I see from your nodding, you know exactly what I mean on that.
Yeah.
It's gonna, because you can just click back in. So it's, which is beautiful now.
But how did you end up walking 6,000 kilometers on the Camino, and you keep going back, and you were about to walk another one?
There was something about the Camino that I knew was incredibly special. And so after that first one, I said, right, I'm going to do one pilgrimage a year on my own. And I committed to myself that was what I was going to do. It was important to me that it was one a year, because the first thing it gave me, and the thing it always gives me, is a perspective on my life that I don't get when I'm in my life. I'm there, I'm living my life, as we all do, we just get on with it, we're working, we're paying the mortgage, we're we're doing all those things. And the one thing the Camino does for me on my own is to take me out of that and give me a chance to reflect, and that perspective is huge. And seeing, I'd made so many decisions on that first Camino, so many things I was like, oh, I'm going to change this and this and this, and I've got these ideas, and it was like my mind could just be free. You take the roof off and just walk for 5 weeks. It's amazing what can happen, And so I thought, I need to have this as a regular practice. Maybe once a year doesn't sound regular, but yes, that big chunk of time away is really important, and that's what I did. So the next year, so 2018, I actually did one in North Wales. I didn't come back to Spain. I did one in North Wales, which was fantastic. North Wales Pilgrims Way, which was really, really lovely, through the Llyn Peninsula. Absolutely gorgeous. But then after that, every year I came back to Spain to do one, even through COVID. So I managed to do the Inglés and the Primitivo through COVID. Even the Inglés, there were no albergues open. I was in hotels every night. It was, a very different experience. But still, committing to do that. And I think that was a really important thing, and kept me connected to it, and helped me not to lose that, and to just continue to grow with it, really. Because my second one, I was like, what's this going to be? Is it going to be the same? It was going to be a lot shorter. It was 7 days. It's like, okay, is that going to be the same? Is it going to be different? What is it? And I'm like, okay, let's let go of the expectations, because it's a different route. It's a different time of the year. You're different, because that was 2 years later. So many things have changed, and just kind of being open to that different experience. But there was something for me about every time I returned to northern Spain, I felt at home. There's something for me about this, just felt like my earth, and that just got stronger and stronger the more times I came back. So I just kept coming back, and then Camino del Norte, and that's where everything changed again, in a big way. In that time, there's so much in my life had changed. I'd got married. COVID had happened. So in COVID, all my business, I couldn't do my work. I was self-employed, couldn't get support. It was very, very difficult. And my husband was also working at home, so we had a real concentrated time at home. We also were trying to have a baby. We got pregnant twice and had 2 miscarriages, which was something that was so tough, and something my Camino's really helped me with. And also his mum died. My mum died, so she got a brain tumour. We found out the same week as I had my second miscarriage. So that it was horrendous. It was so hard, those 5 years have been so hard. They've been so, there were so many ups and downs. Recovery was really good. I was really loving doing my business stuff, falling in love, getting married, that kind of, that whole joy of being pregnant, and then all the tough stuff, the miscarriages were really difficult. I'd never been through anything like that before, and I really wanted to be a mum, and we really wanted to have kids, and that wasn't going to be the way, and and with Mum as well. That was when I did my I went on the Camino Primitivo. So when my mum was having her operation, so she was going in to have the brain tumour removed, she decided to have the operation because it might have given her up to a year of life, whereas they'd given her sort of 3 weeks to live. Before she went in for that operation, she said to me, because I planned the Primitivo, and she said, you need to go on your Camino because you need to process your miscarriage and you need to process what's going on, and you've got to promise me before I go in for this operation that you're going to go. And so I did, and it was really difficult because she was in hospital, but there was a glimmer, there was a space in COVID that just allowed me to get a flight out to Spain, with staying there a few days because of all the testing and all that sort of stuff. But I was able to go on the Camino Primitivo, and only a few days into it, I was having meetings with my sister and with the neurologists on the Camino. Thank God for technology. But they we thought she'd got an infection, but actually it turned out she was really poorly, and they basically said you need to try and get home. And I was so torn at that point, I remember, because I really wanted to get back, but I knew I needed to walk. And so I was looking, I literally searching for hours to try and figure out how I could get back. And no matter how I tried, other than getting a taxi for loads of miles, the Camino it always provides, because it would not let me get out unless I got to Santiago. It was like the message I was getting loud and clear was you have to finish this, and you have to go to Santiago. And so I did the Primitivo in, I think, about 10 days. I did 54 kilometres one day because I needed to get back, and I'd changed my flight. I'd managed to get a flight sorted. I literally, kind of ran quite a lot of it because I had to finish it. I knew I did, but I also had to get back from Mum. And I don't remember a lot of that, but I know that I needed every step of that, because without that, I don't think I would have survived that time. I would have drank again or something, I don't know, but it was such a difficult time. And I got to Santiago. I got to Santiago on my mum's 73rd birthday. It was 28th of September, and I got a Compostela in her name. So apologies, Pilgrim Office, but I put her name down, and I got her a Compostela. And I remember somebody telling me it's a direct ticket to heaven, and I thought, right, I'm going to get this from my mum. And then I flew home that next morning, and it was 10 days before she died. So I was able to, after a few days of wrestling whether they'd let me in the hospital or not because of COVID, but I was able to spend the last 4 days with her and take her a Compostela before she died. And I was with her when she died, and she kind of knew. She knew I'd done that Camino for her as much as for me, as much as for survival and everything else. And it was a beautiful, beautiful journey. But again, so difficult. And that time, the next Camino I really planned was the Del Norte, which was in 2021, which again, I was going to do the whole thing. So I needed another big one. And I said, right, 5 years later, I'm going to do another big one. And a lot of that journey for me was about processing the loss of possibility of being a mum and losing my mum. I've never felt so lonely as that, because I didn't have my mum and I wasn't going to be a mum. And that had... both of those had gone, and that left me in a really, really weird place, and was taking a lot of working through. I had lots of counselling, I was in therapy, I was doing EMDR therapy and all sorts of things, and that was really, really brilliant. But I thought, I need another proper big Camino, and that was when I came back in 2021 and did the Camino del Norte, and that again, life-changing. Realising that my relationship wasn't right, for many reasons, and stepping away from that. But it was also the time I met some really beautiful people and many friends on that Camino, and one of those was Juan Carlos, and after that we fell in love, which was not not in part of the plan at all. It's kind of okay, have some time on my own, regroup, all that sort of stuff, and actually that wasn't what it was meant to be. And so why I've done so many kilometres now is because I moved here in December 2023, and after 2 years of coming and going, after nearly a year of living in my camper van in the UK, so I sold my house and then lived in my camper van in the UK for 10 months, and then managed to figure out visas to move over here, and so I've been living here for the last nearly a year and a half now, and I've just got residency now, so I've got a nice card that says I'm allowed to be here till 2030 at least, we're our relationship's really blossoming, and it's beautiful. But this for me feels like home. Northern Spain is definitely where I'm supposed to be.
Thank you for sharing this story. I was having goosebumps throughout the time you were talking. Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult that period of time was for you. I'm so happy for you now. You manifested your way into northern Spain. But what do you think so special about the Camino that actually lets you to get that self-care experience, that moment to get back to yourself, and process things?
There's a number of things. I think for me, walking is incredibly healing, and I think going out for a couple of hours for a walk, for 20 minutes for a walk, can be healing, but walking all day, day after day after day after day, just opens up things that I haven't been able to access anywhere else. I don't gift myself that space in anywhere else in my life, really. It might be okay, I'll have a couple of hours chilling out or whatever, but that massive amount of space every day, day after day after day, with the process of walking. Because for me, when I did my EMDR therapy, I think that was a real eye-opener for me, because we were doing bilateral stimulation, so it was all about trying to engage the left and the right, and whether that be looking through where your eyes are gazing and left to right, or with the actual tapping, anything like that. And when I said to her, God, I don't know why I love walking so much, and she's just like, it's the ultimate bilateral stimulation. You're engaging left and right, left and right, left and right, again and again. And especially for me with the poles, because that really helps me. It helps me to process, because I'm engaging my arms as well. So like the whole of my body is doing this left and right at opposite times, and that's engaging both sides of my brain. Because I'm a very logical person. I'm a maths, I'm a physics, I'm a logic, I'm a think your way out of it. I can plan the shit out of anything. I'm absolutely just logical, structured, organised, So my creativity, which does come through in those things, but it doesn't always get to play. The imagination and things like that. And when I'm on the Camino, that action really, really helps me with that, combined with the space of it. So that, again, like I say, that perspective with stepping out of life. For me, there is something, so I've done a bit of past life work with some of the work that I've done, and I used to live in northern Spain. So I did some work with a friend, and she was just dowsing. We were just asking questions, and I said, there's something about northern Spain for me, and she said, let's find out what it is. And apparently I used to live in the mountains on the Camino Primitivo. I had 6 kids, and I was cooking for pilgrims, so I was like, that explains why I haven't had kids this time round. I'm still knackered from those ones. But I was cooking for pilgrims, and for me, I just went, of course, that just made such sense to me, and me and Juan Carlos have been in 2 past lives together, which again did not surprise me. It was like we were souls that came together that knew each other. When we came together, we didn't even speak, he didn't speak English, I had pidgin Spanish, and we completely got it. It was a meeting at a complete different level. So there's that for me in northern Spain, which is I know that I've been here, lived here. This is where my soul kind of feels like it should be, and I've really felt that since I moved here. It's like there's that my whole system has just gone. It's kind of like finally found my bit of earth, and I didn't realise the impact that was having on my system, being on the wrong bit of earth before. But there's also, for me, I've done ultra races and walked 100k through the night and all sorts of things like that. They don't feel the same. There's something for me about the history of this, and the fact that there have been hundreds and thousands of people stepping on this same bit of earth, all searching for something. And it doesn't matter to me what they're searching. The fact that they've got up off their arse and they've stepped out of their door and they've gone means that, they want something. They're looking, they're seeking. They're kind of, okay, there's more to this. What do I need? I need an answer or something. And for whatever reason that might be, that for me is I can feel that. I can feel that on the Camino. I can feel that. Not so much in the churches, no, those big ornate churches. That doesn't do it for me. But like into Santos, where there's that tiny little ermita on the cliffs, I just walked in there and burst into tears. It's those places. It's the places where they wash the clothes. They're the places I feel it. You can feel the energy of these people that have been on this, and that is different to just a kind of long walk in the country or whatever. And for me, I think that is something that everybody in the Camino, whether they kind of realise it or not, I think they probably tap into. I think there's an energy that all those people have created, and for me, a safety as well. There's kind of this protected. It's almost like there's like this little tunnel of love, and everybody's just heading along it. That I think for me is why it's so special.
What would be your advice? Let's say somebody who is at the beginning of a healing journey, somebody is watching us, maybe not necessarily, they weren't necessarily interested in walking the Camino, and there we are talking about it. What would be your advice to those people? The healing process is different for each one of us, right?
Yeah.
So how to approach maybe the Camino, walking the Camino in the right way to tap into what you necessarily need right now?
It's a really interesting one, because I never know what I need on the Camino, but I just have to have the faith that the Camino is going to provide it. And so I think one of the dangers with kind of, this kind of, I'll go on the Camino and it'll fix me. It's almost like there's a huge expectation on the Camino to provide this thing. And I think if you're listening to this, if the Camino's already found you, it won't leave you alone. It's one of those things. I've spoken to so many people that have had this experience. They've never heard anything about it, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere. It's like if you're trying to get pregnant and all you see is pregnant women, or you want a red car, and then all of a sudden there's red cars everywhere. It does that. So once it's kind of grabbed you, it will then not let go, if that's what you're meant to be doing. If you've just kind of glanced across this and then you never see it again, okay, it'll just pass you by. That's fine. But if it's doing that, there's some reason for it. And I think for me, I haven't necessarily known what the healing is going to be, but all I've had to do is get prepared, book a flight and go and start walking. The rest of it will kind of be revealed. I think one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself is to try and prepare as much as you can. And make it as easy as possible. I know my first Camino, I did a lot of walking, and I was in pretty good shape for it, so it was okay. But I took way too much stuff, and I could have had quite a different experience. Shin splints in the Meseta was pretty grim. When I trained a lot for the Camino del Norte, I had a very different experience. I was able to enjoy it a lot more. Now, part of that physical suffering of the first one, I think, was part of the deal. I couldn't have done that in any other way, even if I'd have wanted to. But you can try and plan it, prepare for it, and if you can gift yourself a chunk of time, then that's great. But actually, you might not be able to. That might be too much. So you might need to do it in bite-sized pieces. And I think the thing about it is it's everybody's journey, it's their way. But have faith that the Camino will give you what you need, and just turn up. Because my experience has been that there's been the right person at the right time. You know, the first day on the Camino del Norte, I met Mario Marluz. Now, Mario had just lost his mum. I'd lost my mum not long before. And we had a day of talking, crying, connecting. It was so cleansing. And that was the first day. That was just straight out of Iran, first day, you know, and Marluz was with us as well. They've actually got together. They live in Madrid together now. It's beautiful. And it just the magic of it just have the faith that it will, you know, it will provide. But do think about what you want out of it. You know, if you can gift yourself a little bit of time to kind of say, okay, what do I want this journey to be? Because one of the things that you can do, especially on the French way, is you can get a bit swept up in it. There's a lot of people, can sometimes be a bit party, maybe, oh, there's a group, oh, we'll have dinner every night, yeah, let's walk along together, we'll have a laugh. Do you need time to reflect? In which case, gift yourself that. Say to people, actually, I'm just going to walk on my own today, you know, and make sure you're asking people for what you need, because one thing about the Camino is that everybody gets it. If you say to somebody, actually, do you know what, I'm walking on my own today, they get it. They're like, yep, no problem. Yeah, see you later, maybe, or not, you know. I would also say as well, be really wary of walking it with somebody else. Now, that can be the best thing. It can also be the worst thing, you know, because for me it's such a personal journey that I do walk them. I walk them with my fella, but I make sure I do one on my own every year at least, because I need that time for my perspective. And when I went on my first one, there was a friend of mine who I'd done quite a lot of training with, and he said to me, I really like the idea of this, you know, would you mind if I came with you? And I said to him, absolutely, if you want to, but I'm just putting this in place now. I don't know what this needs to be for me. And I don't know if I'm going to need to do this on my own or not, or if I can do this with you or not. So come by all means, but let's just be honest with each other at any point and say, if this isn't working, you know, maybe we need to, you know, kind of go our own way. He was way faster than me, you know, he was approaching it very differently, you know, and a few days in, I said, thanks ever so much. You go on your way. I'm having my own journey. And that's when my Camino really began. Because what I felt was, it wasn't to do with him particularly, but, you know, I felt I could just feel him there. And with him there wasn't the space, you know. So if you are trying to heal, you know, maybe really think about doing it on your own. You're never on your own on the Camino. If you're on a route like the French route, you'll meet the right people. And sometimes being together with somebody else can stop you meeting those people. So you'll find if there's two of you, maybe you don't talk to other people as much, and that might mean you miss out on kind of what the Camino's got for you. So, you know, have a think about what you want, prepare as much as you can. I think, you know, that is really helpful, just to kind of come out relaxed rather than, oh, what am I taking, what am I, you know, there's plenty of guidance and advice you can get, and happy to help with any of that. But really think about what you want to get out of it, and don't forget while you're on it, those things, you know, take time out, journal maybe, you know, those kind of tools that you can kind of use as you go along, but be fluid with it, you know. The Camino will show you the way, whatever that is.
Jo, I know you're trained in compassionate inquiry with Gabor Mate, and was that something that you discovered because of the Camino, or it came later?
Good question. For me, all these things go in a circle. So the Camino leads me to something, and that something leads me to a different experience on the Camino that then leads me to something else. You know, it's kind of like, it's more of a spiral, I suppose. I'm not sure where it's headed to, but it's kind of this spiral that's either getting smaller or bigger. I'm not quite sure which. But I remember, again, another phase of being stuck in my recovery, and kind of, I'd been in 12-step recovery for my alcoholism, and then I'd started looking at the impact of my dad's drinking on me, and compassionate inquiry gave me a real different lens to do that, a much more compassionate approach to that young version of me, that small child that was incredibly hurt, that had gone through, you know, lots of things that she couldn't explain and couldn't couldn't process, and that for me is the trauma, so the trauma's, it's not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. And what happened inside of me was that I developed lots of behaviours, lots of ways of trying to deal with things, lots of, whether drinking, obvious one, but also people pleasing, trying to control everything, many kind of different behaviours and stuff. And I think, so the Camino had given me a space to start to get in touch with my emotions in a different way that I couldn't do when I was back in the normal world, because I'm very good at keeping myself busy and not dealing with any of those emotions. Thank you. I'll just keep them in a box somewhere. So the Camino had kind of made me see what was going on and really feel it in a different way, that then I needed to go deeper with my recovery work. And compassionate inquiry studying that initially was working through my own stuff and then learning how to kind of help other people with it as well. And that journey of compassionately holding those small parts of me. Internal family systems was another one that was really important to me, which is something that I use now, the different parts work, so the different parts of me and what they need and what they're trying to do, and sort of, learning more about those modalities has then enabled me to focus on those when I'm on the Camino as well, and have different ways to process the stuff that I've been through, and the stuff that I'm going through now, and then again, finding different ways and coming back through, so one of my, not just the compassionate inquiry, but last year I spent a lot of work working on my ikigai. I came to Spain and I thought, I'll carry on working with people who've got problems with disorganisation and with hoarding. That was the work I did for a long time. And I thought I'll carry on doing that. And then through working on my ikigai and finding out, what I love, what I know, what I can get paid for and all those things, where I decided to let go of it all and just focus on the Camino. And that I discovered on a Camino, because it was like, oh, of course, like the Camino's literally brought me here. Why wouldn't I make my life around the Camino, but couldn't see it until I saw it, and it was the space on the Camino that enabled me to see it. So I'm on a journey at the moment of using all the sort of tools and things that I've learned to explore myself at a deeper level, to then be able to pass on that to people for their inner journey on the Camino. So my first book is very practical. It's about how you do it, what gear you need, what route, it's all the sort of high level stuff that you need to, just the practical stuff, because we've got to talk about that. We've got to get it out of the way first, because that's the bit that stops us first. It's like life. We have to do the washing up before we do the meditating, and so all that practical stuff is fabulous, but what I really want to support people with is that inner journey that they're going on. And I realised this weekend, actually, on Saturday I fell apart. I had a complete meltdown on Saturday. I went to a theatre workshop, and it was theatre, movement and spontaneity. And it was with a dear friend of mine here. And I went to that workshop and I felt such anxiety in the morning. And I was like, I don't know, I don't think I can do this. And I did what I do, which is I trust my feet. My feet, if I just trust my feet will get me through. They will get me to the places my head tells me I don't want to go to. So I trusted my feet, I went there. And the first couple of hours were great. We were playing, we were having fun, it was all good. And then there was an exercise that involved this massive creativity. It was like, okay, you've got to pick this, you've got to decide what you're going to... And my whole system freaked out. There was a young part of me that so wanted to play, and then there were so many managers, firefighters coming in going, you can't do this, and literally the anxiety came up. All I wanted to do was burst into tears and run away. And I stepped out of that. I stepped out of it and I said, right, okay, and I've got tools now to deal with my system, to kind of regulate, to anchor myself to, various things that I did. And I decided for myself, my conscious self, I decided that actually that wasn't the place for me at that point. It was okay to walk away from that. But the reflection that I was able to do on Saturday afternoon and Sunday was absolutely beautiful, because it was in writing this first book, that's all very practical, it did what I often do, my safe place. I'll go to my head, I'll logic it all out, I'll get all back to the practical. It's all going to be, you know, all that. And so for the last 3 months, I've either been chunk of time on the Camino or chunk of time working here, all logic, all head. So it's been all spiritual or all head, all spiritual, all head. And that has got me through the last 3 months and got me to publish the book and everything. But I've realised that this all needs to come together now. So I'm now on a journey of discovering how I integrate better. After 9 years and nearly 6,000 kilometres of doing this, how I integrate even more what I find on the Camino with my life here in my office, you know. And I want to share about that journey, and that's what's going to form the next book, which is all about the inner journey. So that is where I'm headed next, and I am so grateful again for falling apart on Saturday. Completely lost the plot. Loved it, because what comes after that is just so beautiful, because the help I've asked for, the support I've got, and the plan I've put in place, and what I've been able to produce in this last few days, you know, just in terms of what's authentic to me. And I'm finding it's more and more congruent. All parts of me, they're all coming together. The work I do, the life I live, you know, it's not this separate bits. It's kind of all going like this, and this feels like a bit more of that kind of interconnectedness with me and everything I do. So yeah, that's where I'm headed at the moment.
Can you show your first book proudly? Proudly. I'm so happy for you.
There it is. Oh. And do you know, it was such an amazing process. 450 hours altogether, writing it, editing it, publishing it. Amazing journey. I couldn't even journal before. I've just written 45,000 words. You know, it's like, that's what happens when you get in flow. Literally, within 6 weeks, I had 30,000 words. No resistance. I think that's the main thing that Camino's taught me. You just walk, just keep going, find your flow.
Just walk, you just write a book.
So,
yeah.
Crackers.
Can you show us what you showed me before, some physical things that helped you to go through this? And...
I might cry now. This is my so on the Camino. You wear a little shell on the back of your bag, so it's that's been historically for years. People used to get food in it and things like that as well. But it's to show that you are a Camino a pilgrim on the Camino. And my mum, when I did my first one in 2016, so my mum made me this. So it's made out of felt. And she made it for me. It's absolutely battered now, and she actually put on the back of it, that's one of my nappy pins from when I was a baby. so I wear that on my little bum bag that I have in front of me. And when she died, before she went into hospital, she had beautiful white hair. You can see where I get it from. And my hairdresser came round and we put her some pink and blue in her hair, because she loved dyeing it pink and blue. And actually, when she passed away, I took some of her hair, so I've got a little bit of her hair in here. And I've also got the pictures of the scans of my 2 babies that weren't meant to come to the world through me. I now take them with me. They're always with me anyway, you know, but I take them with me in here. And that gives me the strength, it gives me the courage when maybe I'm feeling knackered after 30k and not ready to go on. It's like, come on, we can do this. So it's kind of Team Joe here in my little thing. So yeah.
Do you have anything that comes to mind, like a story that you would say, okay, this was a Camino miracle?
First one that jumps in, and this was, I can't even remember where it was, but I was leaving somewhere early in the morning, and it was raining. I got my poncho on, and it was on the Francaise. It must have been on the Francaise, because on the Francaise I didn't have a phone. So all I had was the John Brayley guide. I didn't have anything technological. There weren't, I don't know if there were apps then. We weren't using them. So I had no map on my phone or anything like that, literally just following the arrows. And I was trying to get out of this place, and I could not find the arrows. And then I saw this pilgrim, and with his like yellow poncho blowing in the wind and the rain. I was like, yes, it's a pilgrim. And I was like, okay, I'm going to follow him. And it took me a while, but I mean, like, it was really dark, but he got this bright yellow poncho, and I got my headlight, but it wasn't that bright a headlight, but it was enough just to shine the light on him. And I caught up with him after a couple of kilometers, and he was an Italian guy, and his name was like Emmanuel or something like that. It was something really like religious and, you know, important, his name, and he spoke no English or Spanish. You know, I didn't speak any Italian. I remember us having this really weird conversation about chickens, and we were just doing chicken actions with each other and just laughing. And then he said he was going to have a rest, and so he stopped to have a rest, and I carried on. By which time it was daylight. I'd got the arrows. I was kind of all right, and I carried on. And do you know what? That day, that night, the next day, the next night, I asked everybody I met about this guy, and nobody had met him. Nobody had seen him. Nobody had heard of him. And that, for me, is one of the Camino angels. They will come and find you when you need them, and then they will vanish. I've had it with dogs as well. Just come and just escorted me out of places, and that is why I've always felt safe on the Camino as well. I don't have to worry. Like, literally, a person will appear and guide me when I need it. Magic. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Goosebumps again.
I'm gone now, sorry.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It was so lovely talking to you. And I'm sure this conversation and your story will stay with me for a long time.
Really beautiful space.
Hopefully as well. And I hope it offers a light of courage for anyone watching this who might be walking through something difficult in their lives and maybe looking for that door, you know, that path. And that could be the first step.
Exactly. Lovely. Thank you so much for asking me.